Dear ranking representatives of Foreign Policy Association, dear friends of the National Endowment for Democracy, first of all, thank you for your incredible work. And everyone, thank you to everyone who supports this work. This is so important. This is what will define the world in which we all will live. So I'm especially happy to see so many young people here. We count on you because it's going to be up to you in not very short time to decide the world in which we will live. I'm extremely humbled to be here. Really, it's, this recognition goes to all Ukrainian people. It's them who are the champions of democracy today. All Ukrainian people who fight for freedom, fight for democracy, the true defenders of values and principles we all hold dear. I'm proud to stand here and represent my nation in the United States, the nation that surprised so many and continue to surprise and inspire not only people in the US, but everywhere around the globe. I'm also proud to represent my president, very brave, fearless President Zelensky, who not only stayed, which is an achievement in itself, but also led the nation through this very difficult time and fought together with our people, fought for the values, fought for the country. And, it takes a lot of courage to stand up to something with the odds that we had, especially at the beginning of this reinvasion. And of course, this award is, and this recognition is, talks a lot about our partners as well, because it's the extraordinary leadership and extraordinary accomplishments that we were able to do with our American friends, but also with other people who believe in democracy, to actually stay united, to show solidarity together with our friends, allies, in the face of this horrible aggression and war crimes. Let me, again, remind where we are today. In just 10 days from today, we will mark the tragic milestone of 500 days. 500 days since Russia started this unprovoked, unjustified, totally senseless war against my country. In the last 16 months, we have seen the human tragedy of unimaginable proportions. 95,000 crimes documented by the General Prosecutor of Ukraine to date. 95,000. And it's not all of them. It's just those that our prosecutors found hard proof and were able to put together to courts. Behind each individual case of this 95,000 is someone's broken destiny, somebody's dreams destroyed, somebody's future denied. We have lost so many. Deliberate attacks on civil infrastructure, shelling of schools, hospitals, churches, forcible deportation of people, including kidnapping of our children. The question I keep asking myself, and during this time you heard me speaking a lot of time, but the question I keep asking myself from time to time, especially during the night, is what lies behind Russia's acts of extreme violence? What explains this absolutely senseless, barbaric destruction for the sake of destruction? How can someone in 21st century in Europe give orders to launch missiles at apartment buildings or civilian infrastructure or pizzeria, as we have seen a couple of days ago in Kramatorsk? How can someone authorize mass executions, bombings of maternity wards? How can someone authorize laying whole city to the ground, like we've seen with Mariupol? How could someone authorize torture chambers, which we have discovered in Bucha, or in Kherson, or in Kharkiv Oblast? Who are these women who we hear on the intercepted calls, who cheer when their husbands successfully destroy electric power grids, or leave millions of people without electricity during the winter? How can these wives, and it was chilling to hear, encourage their husbands to rape Ukrainian women, or men, or children? Who are the mothers who adopt Ukrainian children that has been kidnapped from the families, uprooted from their homes? Who are the cultural elites, who say they believe in culture, but they support destruction and looting of our museums or our cultural heritage sites. Did they see the shocking images of the Mariupol drama theater destroyed? Did they see Kuinji Museum being completely leveled out? Or Maria Primachenko, a very famous artist who Picasso was fond of her primitive paintings, being shelled during this war? How did they react to the apocalyptic videos of Kakhovka Dam being destroyed and the water of Dnipro River rushing down, essentially destroying, wiping out whole villages, and putting so many people and also animals, natural reserves in danger? I really don't know how to answer these questions. What I do know is that the perpetrators of these crimes will be taken to justice. We will not rest, and there will be no real peace until there is justice. On that day, I will look back to the events of the past 500 days, and I think of the myriad of all these unspeakable sufferings inflicted on Ukrainians. But also I will think of what actually gave my nation the strength to keep going, the strength to keep focused, stay so relentlessly courageous, stay sometimes even stubborn. And I will feel grateful to all the men and women, especially in the uniform, but also all civilians, who after 400 years, just think about it, 400 years of Russian occupation, finally said enough was enough. And it took a lot of courage for Ukrainians who only regained our independence in 1991, just 31, 32 years ago. So today, our position is very clear. The peace formula you heard our President Zelensky suggested last year remains the only realistic and comprehensive plan to restore Ukraine's territorial integrity, to guarantee security and justice, and actually go back to peace. The President of Ukraine, the government of Ukraine, backed by Ukrainian people, which is very important, are laser focused on regaining control over all Ukrainian internationally recognized territory, including Crimea. And I really hope that there will be time when I will not have to add that to when I say Ukrainian internationally recognized territory. Let me underscore, it's not just about territory, really. It's not only about national security. Of course, when we talk about foreign policy, we talk about all of that. It's not even about rules-based international order, which, of course, we absolutely need to restore. It's about real human beings. It's about millions of people who still remain on the temporary occupied territories. And today, as we all sit here and have our conversation, you listen to me in this wonderful dining hall in New York, there are men and women who suffer, who are being tortured, killed, raped, while they're under Russian oppression. In the newly annexed territories, you probably heard it, Russian passportization, forceful distribution of Russian passports, makes men eligible for mobilization into Russian military, to fight against their own people, to fight against their own families. Those without Russian documents, if you refuse it, have no access to anything, no social services, no services at all. Not surprisingly, after the dam has been blown up by Russians, they were not even evacuating people without Russian passports from the flooded territories. So this is something that we have to remember. And also, especially when we talk about foreign policy issues, we have to remind it to people who still advocate for any land for peace type of deals with Russia. Some international politicians, some analysts truly believe that there should be negotiations now between Russia and Ukraine, and they think it's inevitable. These voices probably forget that in the event of such a deal, without justice, without all the territories being freed from the Russian oppression, then the genocide and gross human rights violations would not magically disappear in any lands that will remain under Russian control. We know it. We see it in Russia for many, many years. The political freedoms and civil liberties will be crushed. In any land for peace deal, there would be no peace, certainly not for those Ukrainians who will remain living there. And it's not just the geopolitical imperative that necessitates Ukraine winning this war. And when we say winning this war, we mean withdrawal of all Russian troops from every inch of Ukrainian territory, yes, including Crimea. But it's also about human imperative, the human dimension. It's about human rights and human dignity. And most of all, or even first and foremost, it's about democracy. It's about democracy because democracy is the reason we fight. Democracy is the reason Putin attacked us. Democracy is the reason or the thing that differentiates us from Russia. We have made our civilizational choice as Ukrainians in 1991, of course, based on the struggle of so many generations of Ukrainians, but civilizational choice to be free, to be independent, and most importantly, to be democratic. We really like to elect our officials, and we really like to change them on a regular basis. In 2004, you all heard about Orange Revolution. We didn't go to streets because of the bad economic climate or because anything else. Ukrainians went to the streets because our free and fair elections were tried to be stolen from us, and we couldn't tolerate it. In 2013, we didn't go to the streets because it was so difficult to do business under Yanukovych. I remember, I was in private equity then. No, we went to the streets because he decided to turn away from the European integration and get us under the Russian occupation again. And you people of Ukraine could not tolerate our choice being again stolen from us. So it's, and this is why Putin attacked us, because we never posed any threat for Russia. Ukraine was never going to attack Russia. I mean, anyone who looked at the map, anyone who would compare the numbers could see that this is, you know, even if we wanted, we would never do that, but we definitely never had plans like that. Ukraine was always peaceful. And, you know, in 2013, when Russia attacked us the first time, 14, we were neutral. We did not even put NATO aspirations or European Union aspirations in our constitution yet, similar to Georgia in 2008. So there was no other reason but our civilizational choice to be democratic, and that was enough to attack us. So today, I think it's clear to all of us, the future of democracy and human rights in Ukraine, but not only in Ukraine, depends on the outcome of this war. Depends on the response of the international community led by the United States. The Ukrainian people, or the people in bloodlands, as historian Timothy Snyder so rightly described us, deserve freedom, deserve peace, deserve security, justice, and dignity, which only a decisive Ukrainian military victory can provide. And I would never think, you know, many years before, as the financier, as woman, that I would be not only differentiating different types of weapons, as I do now, but I would say that we need decisive military victory. By safeguarding our sovereignty, upholding democratic principles, and condemning this aggression, we take significant steps to the world where freedom and justice will prevail. You know, these days, a lot of people, again, coming back to the foreign policy discussions, talk about belated recognition of that Ukraine has been a subject, not just an object of history. And it's a tragedy, actually, that our people had to pass the subjectivity test in such a tragic way. No nation must prove its identity and its agency under such terrible circumstances. But now, since it happened, we don't have any other choice. We will fight, as I said before this aggression started, and as we kept saying every day of the 490 days since February 24th last year. Now that it happened, we will always remember the sacrifices made by our soldiers. We will always remember the sacrifices and commitment of all Ukrainian people. I will always honor and remember the sacrifices of Ukrainian women, women who demonstrated the difference they can make, and women who demonstrated that gender has no, bravery has no gender. We have seen new Ukraine emerge, and of course, and I hope in my questions, Q&A with Damon, we will talk more about the future, which after we win and we will start rebuilding, we can leapfrog into not only free, democratic European Ukraine, but also a prosperous Ukraine. Ukraine that will rebuild itself or using all the modern technologies. Everything that we have, we can use so that we can, still in your president's quote, build back better, not just reconstruct what we used to have. And I just want to finish with thanking all of you and thanking all Americans, really. Thanking President Biden, thanking Congress on a very strong bipartisan basis, but all American citizens and all Americans by choice who are not citizens maybe yet, for firmly standing with us. We will always remember it. We know that we wouldn't be able to do it without the support of the largest democracy, but we also understand that all of us together have to win, because the future of democracies, whether we can not only deliver better to our people, we know that, and people who are in business or finance know it for sure, but we have to prove that democracies can also defend ourselves. So with that, again, thank you very much. Please support NED and please support the association. They are doing a remarkable job. God bless America and Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini. Madam Ambassador, that's solidarity.
Yes. And I thank you.
You can see this audience might feel a little bit strongly about support for Ukraine. You touched on quite a few issues, and I do want to get into the future, but first, let me just stick with something personal. I've called her the Iron Lady. She's been Ukraine's Iron Lady in Washington, really strongly defending people who get pushed by her, even want to see her because she's been such an effective diplomat. But the truth is that you've been directly affected by this. You've lost friends and colleagues in this war. Her family has a home in Bucha. You've heard of Bucha, the site of some of the gruesome war crimes in the early part of the war. How have you, and by extension, the Ukrainian people, really maintained this sense of determination and, dare I say, sometimes optimism in the face of such extraordinary, horrific challenges?
Well, thank you, Damon. I think the right answer should be, I do not know, but that's not the interesting answer. So my husband, who's here and who left when the war restarted on the next day and has spent next 4 months in Kyiv and in other places, he promised me not to go, but he went anyway. And our general counsel, who's here, for all of us, it's very personal. So yes, we are diplomats. You are doing your... It's my job to fight for the country and represent the country, but then all of us have family back home. All of us have friends who are fighting on the front lines and family members. And it has been very difficult. I have to tell you, nothing prepares you for war. Yes, we had a lot of contingency plans. Yes, we discussed before the war restarted, how will we communicate? Will we have the connection with Kyiv or not? But then when it starts, at first, it seems a bit surreal. Like every day you wake up and you think, was that a bad dream or not? But then you just realize that, in order to do what you have to do, and yesterday was Ukraine's Constitution Day, and one of the articles in the Constitution, in our Constitution, but I believe in any Constitution, is that it's duty of every citizen to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity and independence. And you just understand that you don't have any other choice. So at times it's difficult, at times it's heartbreaking, at times it's too emotional and too personal, but there is no other choice. You understand that you have to every day move a little bit closer to victory. Do something that moves your country closer to victory, whether you can do it or not. And then we always at the embassy and at the consulate, I know, tell our teammates that, look, you know, it's difficult. It has been very tiring. 16 months is a long period of time. But at least the missiles are not falling on our heads here. And we are not under occupation like so many of our Ukrainians. So there is no excuses for us. We will all rest after we win.
So this is a critical moment in that earlier this month, Ukrainian armed forces began the counteroffensive in the east and the south. I want to ask you a little bit about how to think about that, what to expect. Many people who followed the Ukrainian stunning offensives in Kharkiv region or in Kherson, they were rapid, they were quick, and they see the challenge that Ukrainian forces are facing with dug-in defenses. How should we understand what's happening? How expectations are high. How do you see this counteroffensive going?
Well, first of all, let's look back at February 24th. Since that time, we have been able to liberate more than 50% of what Russia occupied at the beginning. It's quite a lot if you again compare our capabilities and the number of personnel and everything else. We have seen some offensives, some counteroffensives which were very difficult, like in Kiev Oblast. I know it sounds so long time ago, but I remember, you know, the 32 days our home was under occupation, or Kiev Oblast was longer. And at first, there is so much effort, and there is so much fighting, and so many, people lost, and it's very difficult, and you move really not very fast. Similar was in Kherson Oblast, but then in Kharkiv, it took us just 6 days to liberate Kharkiv Oblast. So right now, the operation that we are executing, and that's where our military commanders totally agree with the American and other friends with who we share a lot of information, that this is by far one of the most difficult military operations ever performed on such a scale. And I have to remind you, it's kind of World War I type of war, where Russians had a lot of time to put all these trenches, to be prepared, and we are the advancing force. And it's very difficult when it's mined and it's well prepared. If you listen not to the unknown sources who give interviews to some of the newspapers, but to people who are not afraid actually to put their names to their words, if you listen to the General Milley, the Joint Chief of Staff, if you listen to Secretary Austin, if you listen to our Chod Zaluzhny, if you listen to President Zelensky, the counteroffensive actually goes as planned or even a little bit better than it's planned. It cannot be really fast. First of all, the front line is very long. Second, we are trying, again, I want to remind, and I keep reminding people who have high expectations, that unlike Russians who can destroy everything when they advance, it's our territory we are liberating. It's our people who are being held hostages there. We cannot afford just bomb everything out and move, because we need to protect and preserve whatever is left there. That's why our operations are slower and more careful and more difficult for our brave defenders. But we are going forward. Every day adds a little bit of territory. And we are positive that with a little bit more weapons, I know that's my, with some longer range capabilities, whatever can be given to us faster, or some capabilities that we still do not have, we can quicker break through this first line, and then we will see what people would like to see, this quick counteroffensives.
It is extraordinary to see a democratic free nation's armed forces and how they fight in a real fight versus how Russian forces fight. The head of the military who designed the Russian strategy to bomb hospitals in Syria because they knew civilians wouldn't leave Aleppo until the hospitals were destroyed, being an architect of this attack. You're not playing the same game. You do value people and land. Speaking of Russia, we're here at a time that was extraordinary, what we just saw last weekend. We saw a mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, Putin's chef, the man who made billions and billions off of catering for the Kremlin, built a mercenary army, the Wagner Group, moving into Rostov-on-Don, taking over a city of 1 million where much of the war is orchestrated from, and beginning the march to Moscow, and within 200 miles of the capital of the Russian Federation, with not much resistance at all, and a surreal negotiation with Lukashenko, another dictator next door, turning course. Wow, the dust is still settling. This is really significant. But as someone whose country is engaged in an existential fight with the Russian military, with Russia, what does the turmoil in the Russian command and control military, this whole incident, what potential implications could it have for the war, for Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we have seen it all during the aggressive, unjustified war in Ukraine. We have seen that they're still fighting like the Soviet army. We have seen that they only are capable of really doing all this destruction and creating all these horrors in Ukraine and not being pushed out already simply because they have quantity of people and equipment, simply because they do not have any red lines. So yes, they will not stop from, shelling at residential areas or hospitals. The 2 days ago, again, this horrific attack on pizzeria in Kramatorsk, they specifically sent the urgent to videotape how many people are inside so that it's actually meaningful in their way. He did it. He sent it to his, the guy is arrested already by the counterintelligence, and he has provided the, he was telling about everything. He sent it to them. They bombed it, and then they sent him to actually evaluate the results. They knew what they were doing. They knew it's a pizzeria. So we have seen that, but of course, out of all these Russian forces, this mercenary group Wagner has been one of the most capable ones. Now, it's another, I think, very important element of this to see all of that, but in Russia. So first, we have seen that there is no unity around Putin, that Russian people would unite around any power or person that portrays power. And to see so many people cheering to Wagner in Rostov or in any other towns and cities on the way to Moscow, something that we were telling to all of our partners that this is how it is, but now everyone could see it with their eyes. Second, we have seen how the police or internal forces or National Guard, everything that Russians are using against civilians, everything that Russians are using to actually destroy whatever civil society or opposition or independent journalism is there, is totally useless and incapable of stopping even a couple of thousands of well-equipped and battle-tested war criminals. So the whole system is actually, there are cracks in the system, and that those cracks are pretty wide. So the third is that we have seen the image of Putin, which again, we have all suspected, I mean, we Ukrainians knew, a guy who was scared, a guy who recorded a very not dictator, powerful message, the guy who started calling all of the neighbors around Russia, and the majority of them said, it's your internal issue, bye, don't call us anymore.
Awkward phone calls.
And then I think it was only the son of Uganda's president, if I don't, who put out the public statement that he's ready to go and again,
son.
but I think it was such an eye-opener that has shown, how, what do you call it, that the king does not have...
The emperor has no clothes.
The emperor has no clothes, actually. which again, it doesn't mean that Russia will collapse tomorrow. Unfortunately, we cannot count on the military operation to stop, and we have seen how been humiliated like this. He actually sent all these missiles on pizzeria and, doubled down on people who are, defenseless, who are civilians. But it, I think, has to be a wake-up call for all of us, that we have to double down. We have to get to victory faster. We have to be more decisive in providing Ukraine with more weapons. We have to be more decisive in sanctioning more Russian businesses or more Russian government officials. We have to be more decisive in engaging with the rest of the world, because we are not the only ones who have seen that the emperor has no clothes. Right. So I think it's a very pivotal moment, if not in the war in Ukraine again. We sometimes sadly joke that we Ukrainians will not be that lucky. We have to work for everything ourselves. But I think it's a pivotal moment in general for the free world, for the NATO countries, for not only NATO countries, but anyone around the globe who believes in not only democracy, but just territorial integrity or sovereignty or, It's a moment for us to understand that we are stronger, and we should not be shy to actually defend our values.
That's right. So last week in London, there was a major international conference on recovery in Ukraine. Many of NED partners were there, our core institutes, ASIA was there representing the endowment. But President Zelensky, first of all, it wasn't a reconstruction conference, it's a recovery conference for Ukraine, looking to the future. President Zelensky said that it's not for him just about recovery either, it is about the transformation of a holistic transformation of Ukraine for the future. What did he mean by that, and how do you see the role of the business community, the private sector, in that recovery?
Well, you have a saying, I think, if you get lemons, you have to make a lemonade out of them. So, again, let's look back a little bit. 1991, Ukraine became independent after centuries of not having our statehood. All the institutions that we received in 1991 were hand-me-downs from the Soviet Union. All the infrastructure that we received was very inefficient. It was built in a planned economy. Nobody was counting how much the natural resources cost or something like this. People were not educated in finance or in anything else. So of course, and there was a neighbor to the north and east who always, since 1991, regardless whether it was Putin or even before, thought it was the biggest tragedy that Soviet Union collapsed. So with us not having our institutions, our capabilities, did not have time to learn quickly. The privatization started, the Russian influence returned very quickly, and the whole system, on top of Soviet inefficiencies, received the new oligarchs and they captured so many industries, and then corruption in addition to the past Soviet inefficiencies. And we actually only started rebuilding or truly building our country, truly doing the reforms in 2014. Just this couple of years, and we have done a number of reforms. I mean, it's, completely redoing the energy sector, getting rid of the Russian influence, getting rid of what we call the president's corruption, the gas and everything else. Really restarting our public finance system, our monetary system, our national bank oversight, our procurement, which was a major source of corruption before. So judicial reform, we created the anti-corruption infrastructure. So all of these reforms during the 8 years, the big reforms of our armed forces, by the way, the fact that we have implemented NATO standards in our armed forces enabled us to fight like we fight now, just 8 years of these reforms. Because if we were just a smaller Soviet type of army, we could never fight efficiently against a much larger Soviet type of army. But we are not fighting like Soviet army. So all of that has been interrupted first by the war. So of course the goal is to win now the war, but even during the fight now, as you saw, we are also continuing to implement this reform. So when President and all the team thinks about how will we reconstruct or recover or rebuild Ukraine after we win, this is the vision that we have, leapfrogging into the future Ukraine, not only rebuilding the physical infrastructure that we have lost, but actually doing it better. So we have already a strategy in energy, where we will go, how we will not rebuild the coal mines, which we had to close even before, you know, but it was a very difficult issue. Now, since all of that is destroyed, we will rebuild already the new type of, you know, from the renewables to the small modular reactors, everything that is inspiring. Similar digitalization that helped us during this time. Our banking system survived because it went into the cloud and they were like very mobile, and people, this is probably the first war ever when people, instead of taking money from their accounts, at the looming occupation, were putting money into the accounts because they knew the banks will take them out. And then they will move to safety, reopen, get their cards and have access to their accounts. 20 million Ukrainians are using the DIA system, our digital application. This is our main communication with the state. Our passport is there, our driver license is there. I can sign pretty much any request to the government and receive the information. So the idea behind is to do it better from the standpoint of industry and everything else, but also to build the democratic institutions, to continue on the rule of law reform, to preserve our anti-corruption system. And you hear even during the war, I mean, you all heard the horrible case, our Chief Justice, who has been arrested because of the bribe. And on the one hand, yes, it's horrible that a Chief Justice of a country is arrested during the war on alleged bribery case. But on the other hand, it also shows that the anti-corruption infrastructure we have created really works, that nobody is untouchable. So, you know, so this is what we mean, that, you know, we want to get out from this war stronger, not only in the military sense, not only in, you know, clearing our territories, but also becoming a better country.
I do want to share that, as I've shared with the ambassador, I went to Ukraine 2 months into the war to visit many of our partners, and 3 things really jumped out at me in those early days. One is that the issue of corruption, something that many in society had had to tolerate, now is perceived as something of treason. Stealing from the state in the middle of the war, a societal change towards the acceptability of corruption. Second was an extraordinary digitalization, when I think any European country's systems would probably have collapsed under a full-scale invasion, to see how well Ukraine worked with digital assets during the war, as you've just spoken to. And third, the effectiveness of implementing a decentralization, empowering people locally, had empowered mayors and governors and other to help defend the country. So how do you see Ukrainian, I guess 2 parts to this to close. How can Americans, particularly private sector, think about their contribution to Ukraine's recovery? And how do you see Ukraine's recovery and victory in this war affecting the broader European landscape, the global landscape? So a little bit of advice for us and the implications of Ukrainian victory, and we'll close with this.
This is my favorite question. Now I can put my ex-Minister of Finance / private equity person. Well, first of all, the time to look at Ukraine as a potential place to be and invest is now. Yes, we didn't win yet, but we will win. And as you know, it will take time to research, to review, to look at the opportunities, to find local partners. The time is now. I'm organizing probably more trips to Ukraine, and it's not only government officials, and it's not only, the former government officials or candidates. You probably saw that Vice President Pence has been in Kyiv today. But it's also a lot of business delegations, the top CEOs or the group delegations. Because again, when we win and we start reconstructing, it's going to be too late to invest. It's going to be too expensive. The time is now. Now, why am I sure that Ukraine has a lot of opportunities? First, we're doing these reforms to create a level playing field, and we're very committed to that. Second, we have been saying for ages about the fundamentals that Ukraine have. We own 30% of global black soil. That opportunity is still not fully developed. Yes, Ukraine is already in top 5 exporters of grain. We are number 1. We used to be number 1 before the war of sunflower oil. We're in top 5 exporters of honey, barley, and everything else. But the productivity in our agriculture is still very low. With just a little investment, we can double, triple, or increase the productivity. We really can feed the world. Energy, we have been exporting electricity all the way until October 2022, even during the war. Only after Russians started physically destroying the grid, that's when we were not able to continue the exports. But even now, we are putting the interconnectors, we are connected to the European grid, and we really, with the nuclear power, which nuclear industry is very well developed, it's 50% of our energy mix. We can do more. We have all the engineering and personnel for it, so we can actually be a supplier of energy to the European Union, and not only. With digitalization, our DIA platform, which we are using for ourselves, it's a breakthrough platform. We have already donated it to Estonia, which was considered the most technologically advanced country in e-government before. And we are working, we just announced with the USAID that we will be donating it to Colombia, Zambia, and we actually are ready to do more. And we are given the codes for free. It's the USAID is only paying for countries to actually change their registries and everything else to do it. So in essence, this war not only affected Ukraine and Europe, it affected all of us. All of you who are in business see how the supply chains are disrupted, and we know that they will never be the same. We know that we cannot rely and look for supply chains only based on cost effectiveness, which again, for me, it would be also the way to look at it. But we now know that some people, some countries like Russia, not only Russia, we know quite a number of other countries that could weaponize it. And at times of need, if you don't have access to critical materials or to critical parts or to food or to energy, it becomes a national security issue, not only business issue. Ukraine is not only ready, but really willing to be a very reliable partner. By the way, in addition to the black soil, we also have a lot of the rare earth materials in Ukraine, from lithium to everything else. We have titanium. So this is a chance to invest in emerging, potentially one of the fastest growing markets in Europe, with a potential to export from Ukraine. And this is, I think, for business, this is a great opportunity to take a look now. Now we can also be a solution to so many global challenges or challenges here. If you look at the IT and innovation businesses, if you look at the financial sector in Ukraine, then this is something that could be used. Like if you, by the way, I was even surprised myself, to learn how many of the systems in the US are actually coded by the Ukrainian programmers, by the companies, for the airlines and for the toll roads, and you look at deep down, and then you're like, oh, it's this, it's this company or this company, and it's a Ukrainian company. So we not only want to be a member of the transatlantic family because we can have something from it, but also because we can add a lot. And also, thank you to all the business that helps now, especially business that has been in Ukraine before the war. I think it's remarkable how American business not only stayed, but increased their personnel, like Boeing. I don't know if many of you know, but they have R&D center in Kyiv. Their people decided not to leave, even women who could. And they actually added 100 jobs in Kyiv during the war. So they have 1,100 people working for Boeing out of Kyiv during all the 16 months. And I can call a number, from, like, you can name Citibank, you can name Cargill and ADM and Bunge, and so it could be done. Talk to us, use us as a resource, if I may use a little bit of advertisement here. The embassy and the general consulate, we are here representing our country, but really for businesses that want to invest in Ukraine, we would be honored to represent you. We would be honored to help you. Talk to us, ask us, get all the information that you want to, and together with American Chamber of Commerce and other business associations, we would be happy to show you and tell you about the opportunities. And thank you for your humanitarian support. This has been very, very valued and needed.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. It's I love ending a conversation on Ukraine with a dose of optimism. I want to invite Noel back up to the stage with us because we aren't going to let the ambassador go without saluting her with the New York Democracy Forum Service Medal for her contributions to the cause of democracy.
Madam Ambassador, we take great pride in presenting you with the New York Democracy Forum Medal.